Many years ago, I learned this way of thinking is there are some documents that just explain what do we do.
Hmm.
Okay, so what we do, who is doing it, and responsibilities. This kind of documents is what we normally call um, procedures. I don't use so much that language that is very common in certain countries, like policies. Okay, I
Hmm.
call it procedures. So this high level. Um, so just saying what we do, who is responsible for doing, or responsible authorities, collaboration. Okay, something like that. Then and then we have something when we need to explain, to go to the detail how to do it.
Hmm.
So that's what others call work, some call work instructions. But it's much more detailed kind of document.
Welcome to Secure and Simple podcast. In this podcast, we demystify cybersecurity governance, compliance with various standards and regulations, and other topics that are of interest for consultants, CISOs, and other cybersecurity professionals. Hello, I'm Dejan Kosutic, the CEO at Advisora and the host of Secure and Simple podcast. Today, my guest is Carlos Cruz. He's the founder of consulting company called Metanoia, based in Portugal, and is also the main ISO 9001 and ISO 14001 expert in Advisora. Now, he's in consulting business for 35 years and has performed more than 100 consulting jobs, close to 100 certification audits. So he has really lots and lots of experience with writing all kinds of documents. So in today's podcast, you'll learn what are the best practices to create and manage policies, procedures, plans, and other documents for ISO standards. And what you'll notice is that the best practices for 9001 and 14001 standards can also be applied to ISO 27001, or any other cybersecurity frameworks like NIS2 and DORA. Welcome back to the show, Carlos.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great to have you back here. So you were actually on the first episode of this podcast a while ago. So I'm really glad to have you back here. Great. So how many documents actually did you write in your career?
I don't know. I don't know. Thousands and thousands of, you know, procedures, work instructions, forms, checklists.
Okay,
Yes,
so lots of
thousands and
experience,
thousands.
obviously.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
Good.
Mhm.
Now, let's dive into this topic of writing documents. So, uh, there are different types of documents, like policies, procedures, plans, this kind of thing. So, in which situation actually do you normally? How do you actually choose which type of a document you have to write in a particular situation for a client?
So, for me, everything starts with making a high level view, okay, high level model of how the management system works, okay.
Hmm.
So if I'm working with quality, so I do the mapping all the processes in the organization, okay.
Hmm.
That's the start. But even if I'm doing 14,001, that's not so much process based, but I like to do this kind of big map of how things will work, okay. So, and from there, um, many years ago, I learned this way of thinking is there are some documents that just explain what do we do.
Hmm.
Okay, so what we do, who is doing it, and responsibilities. This kind of documents is what we normally call um, procedures. I don't use so much that language that is very common in certain countries, like policies. Okay, I
Hmm.
call it procedures. So this high level. Um, so just saying what we do, who is responsible for doing, or responsible authorities, collaboration. Okay, something like that. Then and then we have something when we need to explain, to go to the detail, how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what others call some call work instructions. But it's much more detailed kind of documents. Okay, so and I try. It's a fight because in my mind I want to put everything in detail, but I realized after some years that that's not a good practice. So there's a fight in my head is that let's start with the most useful and simple document that as a starter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in some organizations we just do what I call these procedures can be just a flow chart. Okay, a flow
Okay.
chart with the description of the responsibilities, the purpose, and things like that, because I don't want us to waste not waste, but to use a lot of time in doing that. Because if we do that, if we use a lot of time in doing that, then we become very tired for doing the rest, the improvement phase. And so I like to keep it as doing that as fast as possible and as simple as possible. Later, when we do internal audits or when
Okay.
we look into the performance results, we see that what needs to be put more meat there.
Okay, so basically procedures are documents where you describe, let's say the major steps or major responsibilities, and working instructions are, let's say, lower level documents where you actually describe in more details,
Yeah,
maybe particular steps and so on. But what are the
particular steps
policies
or
then?
things like
Yes, sorry.
yeah, or can be something very detailed, or for example, explain what is the rules for coding our the lots in our company. So
Hmm.
it's not a specific step, but just saying, okay, we do things like this, or this is the way we evaluate suppliers. It's like
Okay,
this.
so
Okay, so
this
yeah,
is for working
okay.
instructions, but what are the policies then?
Mhm. So as I said, so I'm according to my experience, okay, according to my
Hmm.
history in doing this, I don't. I don't normally work with that what people call policies. What I do could be related with that is
Hmm.
what we. It's no longer mandatory, but I still like to have to write a quality manual. I like to call it the management system manual.
Yeah.
Okay, so a high level document where we explain, perhaps let's say, the policies for certain topics,
Okay.
or we present the processes and we explain that these high level ideas about what we expect from the processes. So
Hmm.
is it in plain English, in plain French, or in plain
Yeah.
Portuguese? It's yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
great. Yeah, from my experience, let's say in cybersecurity, usually you write policies like, for example, a backup policy, where you basically define some kind of an intent, right? And then you say, okay, for
Yeah.
these systems, the backup will be done according to this frequency. And then you have a separate, let's
Okay.
say, backup procedure where you actually describe in more detail how you actually use particular systems to do the backup, right? So,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
view,
Yeah.
especially in
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
cybersecurity, the let's say policy defines a more general intent, whereas procedure is more, let's say, detail. It describes the process or the steps actually
Yeah.
how something
More
is.
deep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
usually it's like this.
Uh,
Hmm.
and there's one thing that I was missing, and you already mentioned that. So there's another kind of document is the plan.
Hmm.
Okay, the plan. So things like so in quality is something like how do we plan to control the quality of our product in step one or step two or in the final step of
Hmm.
our manufacturing or our service, or how do in environment, how do we plan to monitor certain air emissions or the quality of the wastewater, so how many times, what kind of parameters, who will do it, where will be recorded, where will act based on the results. So it's also very, very important.
Okay, but
very, very important.
what is then the difference between a plan and these other documents like policies and procedures?
So the plan is for me. The plan is like um, it's like a table. Okay, it's just a table,
Mm-hmm.
a very visual, where we say, okay, for each column, we say we put things like what we want to or what we need to measure, when, so another column,
Mm-hmm.
when, who will do that, what are the specifications that will be recorded. So each one of these will be a different column.
Mm-hmm.
And each row will be, okay, for each situation, okay, we have this wastewater,
Yeah.
amount of waste, of amount of quality of air, or noise levels,
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, in my experience, let's say in cybersecurity, you have this risk treatment plan. Basically, it describes, how you're going to implement cybersecurity controls. And from that perspective, a plan is something that is, let's say, time limited or time bound, and it's specific for particular controls. So it's not like a general principles like a policy or steps. It's more concrete, and it says, look, you're going to implement, I don't know, backup control until that time with this kind of resources, with this kind of responsibilities. So it's specific for a specific situation or process or control or whatever. So from cybersecurity, this could be, let's say, an approach to planning, right?
uh, I would say when in 2015 the quality and environmental standards appeared with this version about the risk,
Mm-hmm.
at that time, in my mind, I was thinking something. This is much more easy to be applied by a company that is starting,
Mm-hmm.
or it's their quality level is very, very low. They have nothing, because they will, what they need to do is what you were saying. Doesn't matter if it is cybersecurity, is the same. So what are the main risks for problems with our quality of raw materials, quality of during the steps in the manufacturing and in the final product? And based on that, we develop the quality control plan.
Mm-hmm.
What happens is that when a company in the quality field starts working with the standards, normally they already have a quality plan. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it didn't start based on a risk treatment, but it should start with a risk treatment, because it's like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the basis is the same. Yeah.
Okay. Now, do you prefer, let's say, longer and more detailed documents or shorter and let's say less detailed documents? What do you think is better?
I prefer shorter documents.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned with IT people, okay, I learned with IT people some rules that when I started, and for some years, I did what I normally see. Okay, when people are writing a procedure, they are writing a text. Okay, a sentence, then another dot, another sentence, dot, another sentence. Then I read a book. I don't have it here with me, but I have it in my office. I read a book where the authors were saying, write short sentences, okay, always starting with a verb,
Mm-hmm.
and it's wow, it makes the document much focused, okay. We in Portuguese we say it's not a will, reading the will of the dead. No, it's very tack tack. You need to do this,
Mm-hmm.
this, and this, and it starts with a verb. So what needs to be done?
Okay. But
This. Wow,
why do you think this is
it
better?
was. I like it. It's better because it focus people into what needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that there is no need for words connecting one part with the other, and for people like me, if we don't have that kind of discipline, oh, we don't need ChatGPT. We can write and write and write. a lot of things,
Yeah.
and the important things or are buried in all that text. So yeah, I think short documents, because if the document is very long, um, people will not read it. Okay,
Hmm.
and now more and more people don't have documents in paper, so people have documents in tablets,
Yeah. Yeah.
in screens, and so, and they must be the most important must be in one or two screens. Okay,
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
or two screens. If possible, just one screen.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree fully with you, and especially when working with smaller and perhaps mid-sized companies, this is a better approach. However, what I found is when working with larger organizations, especially financial institutions, these guys are typically used to actually having more detailed and lengthier documents. And especially when I
Mm-hmm.
worked with DORA, the cybersecurity regulation for financial
Yep.
institutions, I found actually that it's better for those, for this particular target audience to write lengthier documents because DORA in itself is very, very much detailed. It's very prescriptive. So to cover all of these requirements, you actually
Mm-hmm.
need to have a larger document. So in general,
Okay.
short, yes, I agree with you, but for some cases, it's actually longer, might be better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What I prefer to do is to have that high level document very short,
Uh-huh.
and then they are deployed into those more detailed other documents.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so you can always start at the high level view and have the big picture,
Hmm.
and then go into those other where more detailed, very specific. Yes, because sometimes there are things that we need to be. So I work, for example, with pharmaceutical companies. Okay, so there are things that must be very clearly
Hmm.
detailed there. Okay, what needs to be done, temperatures, pressures, and okay, and so yeah, so yeah, but that's we do this kind of deploying of
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
documents.
So
Okay.
these detailed documents are probably these
Mm.
instructions that we discussed in the beginning. Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Do you typically prefer having more documents in a company or less documents?
Uh, so I prefer, because of what I was saying, I prefer more documents. So if
Hmm.
they are shorter, more focused, because they are about that. But so but so in because of that, so having more documents. So but each document is much more focused. It's not like, so my background is chemistry,
Hmm.
okay, and uh, I think a lot of, I use that image a lot of times is, um, you see, when we put oil and water, they don't mix, okay, and then we put soap,
Hmm.
and what we normally, what I see in documents is a document is like a drop, and then you have several um, springs coming up from that center. So, for example, for human resources, okay, you have one string is training, another thing is onboarding, another one is salaries, another one is dismissing people. Okay, everything is in a procedure about human resources.
Hmm.
So I don't like that. So I prefer, okay, I prefer, so seeing things as a sequence, as a process. So onboarding is one document,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
short. So whenever there's, okay, we have a onboarding, someone is going to join the company. Okay, it's here, it's this,
Hmm.
or training, it's another one,
Yeah.
or salaries, or
Understood. Yeah.
yeah,
But how
awards.
for smaller companies, how do they make sure that people are not overwhelmed by, let's say, a larger number of documents?
Um, so the number is larger, but each document is very focused. Okay, so it's just for that. Okay, and you know um, that's why the importance of having a high level. document, so where
Mm-hmm.
you have a kind of the flow chart that explains that sends you to, okay, if you have doubts about this, go here. If you have doubts about this, go
Mm-hmm.
here. So it's not a problem, because you may have very small number of documents, but each document is very large. It's a lot of pages, or okay,
Yeah.
or a lot of screens, and people needs to also being there looking
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
right topic. If so,
Yeah. So it's
it's the
probably
same.
also an importance of naming the document so that from the name of the document, it's clear who the target audience is, right? Because I don't know, for these
Yeah,
procedures for, I don't know, hiring and firing people, it's all obviously for HR department. So if it is clear what it is about, then it's clear that no one else should
yeah,
read
yeah,
it,
yeah,
but except the HR employee. So I think it's about naming.
yeah. And
And
yeah,
and for,
you took that topic is something that I like a lot, and I learned also with guys from the IT is the way I try to name is not always possible. The way I try to name a document is a verb and a noun. Okay, and the trick is, if you invert the noun and then the name, you have the main deliverable of that topic. Like, for example, train people,
Mhm,
people trained. It's the main deliverable, okay,
mhm, mhm.
of that. So it's
Uh-huh.
also
Okay.
so the name is very important to be clear what is the topic that we are speaking
Mhm,
about.
mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, in my experience, it's I actually try to when working with smaller companies, actually to reduce the number of documents, even though the documents are already short. And then in this case, I
Mm-hmm.
sometimes actually tend to merge, let's say, policies and procedures. Again, going back to this backup example, there is this backup policy. If this is a smaller company, actually, I would write only the backup policy. I would not write the backup procedure because it's probably too much for a company of, let's say, 20
Yeah.
employees. So I would actually include in the backup policy also the, let's say, a process of handling backup so that they have one document, not two. But if this is a larger company, then I would separate backup policy from the backup procedure, where obviously the policy is more about
Okay.
more generic and procedure is more detailed, right? Okay, now let's
Yeah.
speak a little bit
Yeah.
about structuring documents. So, in your experience, how do you normally structure? I mean, what are the, let's say, general sections that you usually include in your documents?
So there are some things that are there are some things that are always there. So I like to start with the purpose of the document.
Hmm.
So when I started at the beginning, I used to write objective. And then I realized that when we write objective, normally what people write is the objective of the document, but or the purpose of the document. But no, that's not what I want now. Okay, I want what's the purpose of the set of activities that we are describing in the
Hmm.
document.
Hmm.
Okay, and so that's why I always start with the purpose. Then for with some companies, okay, because some companies like it, some companies don't like it, and okay, after that we have what are the uh, KPIs that will measure
Uh-huh.
the performance of that process, or
Hmm.
okay, um, then we may have what are the clauses of the standard that are related with what we are going to mention in that
Hmm.
in
So
that document.
references, yes.
Then yeah, then kind of a matrix with main steps and the responsibilities, authorities, kind of a RASI
Uh-huh.
matrix.
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah, and then comes the flow chart.
Hmm.
Mhm. And for me, the flow chart is very, very important. And then it's like this, as I was saying in the beginning. In some companies, we stop there at the flow chart. And then, okay, we put something like, or we put there something like a matrix with the records. Okay, what are the records developed or related with that document? So, and for some companies, it's like that. For other companies, after the flowchart, we include a description, okay, of the actual text describing, okay. For me, in theory, it would be something like, I would always start with just the flowchart, and then when we measure and we look into performance audit results, we will realize, okay, there are here some documents where we need to be more detailed. Okay, let's write the text after the flowchart. Okay, so that's for me that it's the best approach. Again, I want to reduce the amount of time that we use to develop the documents, because I want to make people, I want that people don't think that implementing a management system is just writing the documents. No, it's writing the documents, implementing, monitoring, and improving. Okay, if I'm the consultant, if when I leave the company because they are certified, they already performed 2 or 3 iterations of improvement, it's very possible that without me, they already will continue that. Okay.
Okay, we'll come to this. Sorry to interrupt you. We'll definitely come to this this topic of, let's say, embedding this into the company. But let's first discuss this structure. I mean, try to come up, let's say, basically discuss this structure of the document. So, I mean, what do you do you have, let's say, some sections that typically come at the end of the document?
Just that one that as I mentioned. So the matrix, okay, the matrix of the record. So the rules to retain the record, okay. You mentioned. I remember I mentioned at the beginning to put there the KPIs, okay. In some companies, we also include a plan for monitoring those KPIs. So the frequency we will monitor, where they will be stored, but not in all companies. Okay, not in all companies, because so I kind of have the framework in my mind. I present to the companies, and so some companies accept, some companies don't accept, and I understand, because they may say, oh, then we will, if we need to change the frequency, there may be a chance that we forget to do that, and then the document will be not updated. And so, okay, we need maybe better to have a global plan where we put that. Okay, so
okay.
Yeah, for me, okay.
Typically, I put at the end of the documents, I put the document owner and the frequency of the review of the document, because I find this that then it's much more clear who is in charge actually, and how often they need to review this.
Okay. I sorry, because you're right. So in the first page, okay, we have the title of the kind of identification of the kind of the document, and the title, the name of the document, something like qualified supplier, and then we have also related with the control clause 7.5 control of documents. We have something like the code, the identification of the document, the version of the document, sometimes the date of the document. When I work with pharmaceutical companies, it's funny, because once I heard a marketing guy saying that pharmaceutical companies always have a date with the graveyard, because their best sellers at some point they will lose the patent. Okay, they will not be protected by the patent, and then the competition will start. And so it's funny, because with some pharmaceutical companies, we put there the last day that the document is updated, to be sure to be sure that the document is not being used after some time. Okay, because
Okay.
some are FDA approved, and the FDA don't expect that they review. It's not review just checking. Oh, does this document needs to be reviewed? No, no, no. We must we
Yeah.
must even if we don't make any changes in the document, we must
Okay.
update the date and
Yeah.
so and so.
Okay, so you can put the document owner and let's say review period
Yeah,
and the validity the period also in the beginning in this, let's say, front page of a document, so that you don't actually put it at the end. So it's really up to each
yeah,
company to
yeah,
decide. And what I typically also do in the beginning of the document, I also put the purpose, but I also usually put the users and the scope, because I want it to be clear what is basically the distribution list of this document. And when I actually specify who the users are, and I don't mean names, I actually define what are the departments or let's say the roles that need to be informed, because it's much easier than to distribute this document. So this is why I find this, let's say, users
mm-hmm.
as a useful one. And scope, I
Okay.
find it useful because then it's actually clear to everyone to which, let's say, departments or which processes or which technologies or whatever this document applies to, and by definition
Mm-hmm.
then what it does not apply to. So it's I think it's easier for readers of the document to understand what is this about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so about the that distribution.
Hmm.
Okay, so it's it's another. I follow a different approach. So what I have is a plan where I list. It's something that normally certification auditors ask, is a list of all the documents that are relevant for the management system.
Uh-huh.
So we have a list of all the documents. What's the current version,
Hmm.
and and we we may use the same plan, okay, but we we sometimes, or most of the time, we separate because we don't want to send that part to certification auditors, but is to then have what you were saying, the distribution of the document. Yeah, because we want to be sure that when a document is reviewed, is changed, the version is changed, we must be sure that the previous versions are destroyed, or people are informed that the previous version is no longer in use, and they are warned that we have a new version.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, but where do you normally then keep this distribution list? What is, let's say, the best practice in your opinion?
So most of the companies use a kind of uh, is a table. So it's a plan where we put there. It's uh, it's in a computer file where they have that list.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. But do you actually
Um,
have it for each and every document separately, or is this a distribution
no, no,
plan
no, no, no,
for?
no, no, no. It's for all documents.
Yes,
Okay,
but
for
if
all
you have a
documents.
distribution list for all the documents, it's not that every document needs to be read by everyone. I mean, this example for HR
Yeah,
departments, it doesn't need to
exactly.
be
Yeah,
read
yeah,
by
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
whole company, only the HR employees.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. No, what's included, specified there, is who has we need to use this document, so
Uh-huh.
we need to
Okay.
have access to this document. It's there. It's
Okay.
there.
Okay,
But
so it's a different
no.
approach. So again, I prefer
Yeah.
actually to have this
Yeah.
written in the document itself.
Okay.
But okay, obviously there are different approaches to this. Okay. Now, how do you actually? And by the way, just to mention, you mentioned also that you have these flowcharts, and yeah, flowcharts are very useful, I think, for procedures, but for policies, probably not, right? Because policies are
Yeah.
not
It's very
procedural
high
documents.
level.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's so
Yeah. Yeah.
for
Yeah.
procedures, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
It's very high level. Yeah.
now for documents, how do you actually ensure when you work with your clients, how do you ensure that this what you're writing in the, let's say, a procedure, really reflects what is a current state of what the company is doing, right? How do you actually
Okay.
adapt these documents to be a right fit for a particular client?
Okay. One previous topic is that when I write these documents, I try to warn the company or the organization that we are not going to write how we want things to be done. We want to write how things are currently being done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so one thing is taking pictures, like the old way of taking pictures. Okay, another thing then is when we compare the actual picture with the requirements of the standard or with the results, and with, oh, we need to change, we need to improve, we need to make some changes here. That's another thing. Okay, because if we try to do both things, it's possible, but takes much more time. Okay, so then what I do is I try to have an interview with relevant people that are doing what is being described in the document.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if I'm doing a document about how to onboard people in the company. Okay, so what I do is, okay, so normally who is included in the onboarding process? Okay, we have one or two persons in the human resources department. Okay, we may have we have the people that are the head of departments that will receive the new people. We'll have so okay. Now we we have an interview with those people.
Mm-hmm.
So and they speak and they speak and I write, I make drawings, I I try to collect that information,
Mm-hmm.
and then um, I think I have this technique described in that book, okay, about ISO, the
Mm-hmm.
discovering ISO 9001. But it's like, then what I do is I use the highlighters, okay, colorful highlighters, and I'm going after the verbs,
Uh-huh.
because the verbs will be the anchor points for then translating the conversation. Because normally people don't follow a chronological order. So someone will say, I will do this and this and this. Okay, then another one will say, oh, we also do this. Oh, we also do this. And then, okay, we need to try to make try to find the flow,
Okay.
how
So,
we do it as a flow.
so the point is that you are adapting, let's say, this particular document to the specific, let's say, process that exists in a company, right? And
Yes. Yeah.
it was interesting that you were saying that actually you want to kind of write how it is, not how it might be in the future, right? But sometimes actually the companies, when you tell them something like this, that they have to describe their existing processes, sometimes they say, okay, but how do we make sure that this will be compliant with the standard? How do we actually respond to let's say, a
Okay.
question like this?
Okay. So first, we describe what we are doing. We must have a kind of we must have something palpable, something concrete. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
because this is how we do it. Okay, and then and then um, we compare with we compare with the requirements of the standard. We need to do that kind of a gap analysis and
Mm-hmm.
to see, okay, are we doing, is something missing here? Do we need to, for example, is typical. People, every company will say, "Oh, we do training. Oh, we train people. Yeah, we do training." And okay, and what kind of evaluation do? Oh, at the end, we ask people if the trainer was okay,
Hmm.
and the trainer will also evaluate. Okay, but effectiveness of the training,
Hmm.
how do you measure? Carlos, what do you mean with that? Okay, so we don't do it. Okay, let's, or yeah, so it's an example. So okay, we need to change this. Okay, we need to include this. But yeah, we need to do that because there are things that companies. So there are there are some areas in companies that we can say, for example, for quality in the commercial department, almost the companies do comply with the requirements of the standard. Okay, but for example, they may not do, they may not evaluate customer satisfaction, for example. Okay. So how do you want to evaluate customer satisfaction? There's this possibility, this possibility, this possibility. Oh, Carlos, what is your opinion? Okay, this one has these pros and cons. This one is pros and cons. Okay, my opinion, I think that will be better for you if you follow this approach.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what do you think? How useful actually is it to use some kind of templates when you are working on documents for a company?
Okay. Glad you asked that, because there are things, there are situations where I think templates are useful. Okay, so things like internal audits.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we don't need to invent the wheel. Okay, and it's something that we can use the main the skeleton. Is similar for any company. Okay, then the company may have different requirements for auditors and so different, but okay, for internal audits, for corrective actions,
Mm-hmm.
for okay, even for example, things like complaints. So at least as a starter. Okay, as a starter. So these are in these are for example, document control.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, and things like that. I think templates are useful. Okay, templates are useful. Oh, if so, all the so if I was thinking in terms, I'm sorry, this is just more for people that work with 9001. So topics that are in clause 8,
Mm-hmm.
I try to be as more specific with the company
Yeah.
as possible. But other topics like about the maintenance, clause 7, or training, or clause 9, monitoring, or management review, we can use templates
Templates. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's something that is more high
Mm-hmm.
level. So yeah,
Yeah.
for environmental management systems, I think we can even use more templates.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
because it's not something that is very again, clause 8. So what are the operational control or the emergency situation? That's more the specific of each organization. But um, how do you determine, evaluate, and okay,
Mm-hmm.
environmental aspects? That can be, yeah,
Yeah. Well,
risks
yeah.
also.
What we've actually found is that there are some, let's say, crucial things that that companies need to adapt these documents for their specific needs. And usually it comes down actually to three things. This is people, processes, and technology. When you think about it, these people, processes, and technology are actually at the core of organizational kind of behavior, right? And then basically when we create these templates as part of our toolkits, we always make these templates in a way that we actually enable our clients to change, well, people meaning roles, the processes meaning the steps, and
Yeah.
technology if they're using some technology for a particular process. And in that way, by actually asking them to insert their own people and processes and technology, basically enable them to adapt this document for their specific needs. So I find this approach of people, processes, technologies as a concept of actually
Technology.
adapting documents the best way.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Because for example, the people. Yeah. Different companies. Different companies. So the the scope of
Mm-hmm.
responsibilities. It's depends on tradition in each company. Depends on tradition. So the same name for the function in one company and then and another company, they may have the same name, for the function,
Mm-hmm.
but the scope of activities, the responsibilities, and the authorities are very, very different. So that one, also, the technology, the
Yeah.
technology is yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now, ISO standards specify which documents are mandatory, and basically it makes it clear in the standard. It says, this shall be documented or shall have documented information. So it's clear. Actually, it's easy to understand from the standard itself what is mandatory to be written down. But most of the things, most of the policies and procedures are not mandatory. So how do you actually decide, or how do you recommend to your clients what to write down, even if it is not mandatory?
So as I said in the beginning, we do that kind of mapping, global mapping. So the model of how the management system works. So we determine what are the processes, and then I say that each process needs to be described.
Mm-hmm.
How we work in each process, and so I want them to describe the how each process works. We can use one document to describe two processes, or we can use or we can describe a process in two or more documents. That will depend. Okay, but that level of what needs to be done, the what, the who, and the when, it's always written. Okay, it's always written. It's not mandatory, but okay.
But this is actually the point, let's say that a company has, I don't know, 50 processes and it's a very small company. It's not going to document all of them because only, I don't know, 5 or the 50 might be important. So how do you actually decide?
Yeah.
How do you
It's
decide
the
which will be
relevance.
documented and which not?
It's the relevance of the set of activities in that process.
Uh-huh.
I use for many years. I use the example of snail mail. So the old mail. So we may write a sequence of activities, a process, a flow chart about how to handle mail in our company. Okay, does that mean that will we do it in our management system? No, most of the time, no. But if our company is a catalog company selling by catalog and receiving orders, okay, by mail and by email and by mail, of course we need to translate that into a process. It's relevant. It's about thinking about the importance of the topic for the scope of the management system. So, for example, there's a clause in the quality standard about maintenance, okay? And there are some organizations, or I would say 50% of the organizations I work with, that we have a procedure about maintenance. But the other 50%, we don't have a procedure because it may be a work instruction connected to the manufacturing, because it's something very simple, very easy, something that they will do in the August the plant is closed and someone is there during the general maintenance. So it is something that is really relevant for the management system objectives. It's something that because of what we are doing there, we have some issues in the performance of the management system. No. Okay, so we don't need.
Yeah. In cybersecurity,
but we may update that decision, okay, based on monitoring results and the audit results. We may update that decision.
In cybersecurity, basically, we use usually the concept of importance is basically the concept of risks, right? So the higher the risks, the more likely you will write a document because it needs to cover these risks, and you want to make sure that you actually have a documented process to cover the highest risks, right? So the risks are usually one criteria. But
Yeah,
another criteria might actually be the number of people involved. Because if you have, let's say, 3 people involved, you might not need a document, because if these 3 people are sitting in the same room and they know each other very well, they probably don't need a document. But if there are 300 people involved in the process, you probably need to write it down, because otherwise, how will you make sure that all of them will follow the same process, right? Or if you go actually to the other extreme and have only one person doing a process, you will also probably need to document it, because if this person goes away, then you need actually someone else to take over this process, and then actually you should document it, because it's only one person who knows it, right? So in these extremes, very few or very large number of people, then usually you should document it, whereas if you have a moderate number of people, typically you won't document them.
Yes, and also if there's high turnaround of people, so people are always coming in, coming out, going out of the company. So okay, that means that we need something stable. Okay, a document is necessary for that situation. Yeah.
No.
Okay. One thing is we are mentioning here documents, so we are mentioning here, and we're mentioning writing, so things like and we think about all procedures in terms of screens or in terms of paper, but can be a video. Okay, can be a video. We can use a video
Can you give some examples of video procedure in a company?
So video, for example, how environmental management system. So how to good practices in separating the different kind of waste. Okay, segregation of waste. It could be an example. Another example could be many years ago, I had an experience with a company. They were manufacturing pine furniture. Okay, and they say, in pine furniture, in the pine tables, you will find there some black or not black, it's brown spots. Okay, and we call nodes. In Portuguese, we call it nodes. And we say, okay, if the node, if we find a wood with a node, we cannot use it. And I was checking in the company. Oh, but that table, that wood there's you are using it, and there's a node there. Oh, it's very small. Oh, okay. So we can use also this kind of videos for decisions, so these controlled decisions, for explaining what is okay and what is not okay. Many years ago, I worked with a Japanese company in the automotive industry. They were manufacturing wire harnesses for cars, and they were incredible with the kind of the displays and using pictures to show different kinds of errors with components that they were receiving, the border between what is acceptable and not acceptable. So they used, now it's very easy to use videos, but the picture is also,
it's very interesting.
Use that.
And you also mentioned, of course, digital documents, but also paper documents. Now, in my world, cybersecurity digital documents are basically 99.9%. But in what cases are companies using paper-based documents?
I had an experience recently where I was saying, okay, nowadays no one uses paper, and here in Portugal and Spain, about 2 months ago, we had a energy blackout. Okay, so for about 12, 13 hours, there was no energy, zero, and we're saying, okay. There are some documents, that even if there are some documents that we need to have access to those documents, even during the blackout. If it's on a screen, and if the screen is in a computer, the computer may have no battery, the battery may go down, and so if we need, in an emergency, if we need to have access to a document, it's it's important to have somewhere
Yeah, yeah.
somewhere a paper version.
Yeah, in cybersecurity, basically, we have this concept of business continuity, right? In, let's say, many cases, companies do actually print out their business continuity and disaster recovery plans on paper because of exactly what you were describing. Even though, I would argue that even in such cases of blackouts, if you actually download, of course, upfront, if you download all of these plans to your smartphones, you'll probably have them, for a couple of days still, even if in the blackout. So
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
paper documents
yeah.
for disaster recovery, business continuity, but yeah, you have to just simply assess the kind of risk of actually having this downloaded on your smartphone. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Of course, if we don't use paper, it's control. It's easier. Okay,
Mhm.
at least okay,
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah,
easier keeping the current versions, the
yeah,
distribution, and
yeah,
so it's much easier.
and
Yeah,
cheaper. Yeah.
much easier. Yeah,
Okay.
and cheaper. Yeah,
And
and also,
uh-huh.
yeah, once I was doing a certification audit. It was a company, a construction company. They were about 30 people in the company because they were manufacturing high quality concrete. And they had everything on paper. They had 29 versions of a procedure. And in my mind, I remember that. So I started thinking, no one wants to make any changes in this system because each each change will represent 29 copies of a document. Each document had around 5 pages, so 5 pages times 29. No, okay. So no, this is fantastic for crystallizing, yeah,
Yeah.
a management system because no one wants to make changes because it's bore it's it's
Intensive.
it's expensive, it's intensive, it's oh
Yeah.
so yeah.
And actually, if I can mention also on this paper versus electronic, all these tech companies that I typically work with, and they say no, no, we don't have any paper documents, none. And then I asked them, okay, how do you normally make notes? Do you use like I don't know, Evernote or I don't know, Notion? No, 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 I write it on paper.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then I
yeah,
say,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
here we
yeah,
go. We
yeah,
do have paper paper notes at least, and you have to protect paper as well. But okay, anyway, in your
yeah.
experience, who is the one actually to write all of these policies and procedures?
So um when I in my projects, in the projects that I participate, okay, so my approach is I write the first version,
Hmm.
okay, as soon and there are interactions, so I write the first version, I send to the company corrects, reviews, and as soon as they say okay, it's okay to we have the first version, after that, okay, all the changes, all the control is up to them. But the first version is I write it. Okay,
Okay, but why
um,
why not
we can
subsequent?
follow other approaches.
Yeah, but why do you think that consultant, or why in your case you wouldn't write subsequent versions? Why not adapting this document further for a client?
No, because I want them to learn to do that.
Hmm.
I want to take the responsibility for doing that. Okay, everything okay. So we have a first version. The the person responsible for that document made the final approval. Okay, now the document is yours. Now it's up to you the control. Even if next month I will do an audit, or someone does an audit and they okay realize that we need to make some changes here in the document, okay, I will check if they are doing the changes, if they are doing the in the document and the changes are being done according to the procedure. But I'm not the one doing that because I want them to learn that.
Okay, to maintain it.
because
But so when you say that you are doing the first version of the document, are you saying that the first draft version or the first approved version of the document?
the first uh, until the first approval of the document. So the first draft, I send the first draft to the persons involved. They they make changes, they correct, they ask questions, and we fine tune. And then okay, they send to me. Okay, I make
Aha,
another version.
I understand.
Okay,
Okay.
um, so um, the we are still in version 0, 01,
Zero
zero
two.
02,
Mm-hmm.
03. When we go to 1.0, now it's yours.
Okay, okay.
Okay, now it's yours. It's up to you. Okay, because I want them to have the experience of controlling. Because if they only start doing that when I'm going out, when I leave the company because the project is done,
Mm-hmm.
they will have difficulties in doing that, or more difficulties in doing that.
Mm-hmm. And how does this document, the review of the document work? So basically, you write the first draft and then send to a couple of people in the company. Who do you normally send this document to for review?
Um, I send to the uh, I send to one or two persons. So the one or two persons that were present in that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sometimes that will depend. Sometimes I'll send also to the responsible of the document, because sometimes, so some companies we have, I recently had an experience with heads of departments in a company
Mm-hmm.
that it was a pleasure to work with them, because they had their jobs, they had a lot of things to do, but they took this seriously, and so they find they consider their responsibility also to check the document, to make their comments on the document. Um, so one or two people that were present in the interview. Okay, so okay, I send for get that sometimes. Okay, to the heads of the departments or the responsible of that kind of document. Yeah, some organizations, what they do is that upfront they determine a kind of number, one or two, three people
Mm-hmm.
that will be responsible for the final approval uh, before the CEO
Mm-hmm.
approves the document. Okay, it's not mandatory to the CEO to approve all documents, but there are companies that decide that the CEO will approve all documents. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so they decide that okay, there will be a team of one or two, three people that will check that document before the CEO. All
Okay.
right.
And with approval, if this is not a CEO, I mean,
Mhm.
who can actually, who else could approve these kind of documents? I mean, make a final approval for a document to be
You
valid.
mentioned the responsible, okay, the responsible for the document, okay,
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
responsible for the document. And for example, when we speak about processes, and the process is trans-departmental, that person is very important, because it's someone that belongs to a department, but will have responsibilities over more than one department when we think in terms of trans-departmental.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very, very, very important. And so that person is normally the person that approves the document.
Okay,
Okay.
but how can a company decide whether a CEO should approve a document or someone below the CEO can approve the document? So how do they make this decision between these two options?
Um, so there will clause 5.1, okay, of the management system standards about the management responsibility. So one member of the top management, at least one member of the top management, will be the main responsible for the management system.
Mm-hmm.
And that, if there's only one, okay, that one in some document, maybe a meeting minute, maybe a procedure, will say who has the authority to approve what kind of documents. Okay, it's a kind of having a chain of authority. Okay, we want to have that chain of authority that starts at the top of the top management and goes up to, if we decide that some kind of forms can be approved by a supervisor. Okay, so the supervisor has authority to make changes to that document and approve the changes.
Yeah. Okay. In my experience, usually it's the depending on actually who does this document refer to, or basically who are the users of the document. So, for example, if this is, I don't know, for example, a backup policy that refers only to IT departments, then typically this can be approved by the head of IT, because it's only related to processes and technologies and people within IT department, right? But if this is let's say a document like access control policy, which covers everyone in the company, then it has to be someone from the top, like CEO, maybe CTO, because it's not only for the IT department, it's also for all the other departments. So it's basically, when you think about it, as organizational structure, as long as actually the users are below some person, then this person can actually approve the document.
I agree with you 100%. But in some companies, there's someone in the top management that wants to approve everything.
No, no,
Okay,
fine, yeah.
so
Of course, yeah. For smaller companies,
okay,
this is usually the
okay.
case.
I don't, yeah, I don't like that because will make things much less dynamic. Okay, but I'm just a consultant.
Okay. Now, we also spoke about this document owner. So this is not mandatory, right? So the standard does not require to nominate a owner of the document. But do you typically recommend this to your clients?
Yeah, I didn't mention that. You mentioned that, but it was my mistake because I always include that.
Hmm.
Okay, I always include the responsible for that document, and if the document is a document that describes a process, yeah, it's very, very important because if it's a document related just with a particular department, almost it's almost automatic. Oh, it'll be the head of the department, but but sometimes, okay, we have documents that describe things that start that so that start in one department, go to another department, and then go to another department. Who is the responsible, the main responsible for this process?
Hmm.
Okay,
Hmm.
and okay, who is the main response? It's very important to be clear who has the authority. Okay, who has the authority? Because normally that person is also the person that will um, do the final approval of what KPIs to use.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
um, what KPIs to use, and it will be the person that will make the proposal for top management about the targets for each KPI. So
Hmm.
it's really important. It's really, really important. So for me, it's not in the standard, but for me, is mandatory.
Yeah,
Mandatory.
yeah, yeah. And this person also should be in charge of updating the document as needed, right?
At least to
Review
command
it.
that. Okay, then the nitty gritty can be the someone in the that is responsible for clause 7.5. But the person that that commands that no one can make changes to the document without the approval of
Yeah,
that
yeah, of
person.
this
So
person, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And so,
yeah.
in your view, how often should the document be reviewed? So, is this like every month, or I don't know, every 6 months, or every 12 months? So, what is the best practice?
It's in for quality. Okay, there's no. For most of the economic sectors, okay, and for quality management systems, there's um, no mandatory frequency or period for doing that, okay.
Hmm.
But I think that at least annually, someone um, making even if we don't change the document, but someone writing in a in a meeting minute writing a decision that we need to change this document or that document, or we don't need to change the document or this document because of this or this or that. So, um, yeah, okay, but there are some. Okay, we are speaking here in terms of the internal documents of the organization, okay, because there are also the external documents like regulation, legislation that may have changes, and we need to be aware of those changes to see if they imply any changes in our own documents and objectives. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, annually at least consider, do we need to make any changes? Okay.
Yeah.
And this can be related. I think if this can be related with updating your risk. Okay. Yeah, because we also in quality and environment, we need also to determine risks and evaluate them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And see if we, yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
because if we have a procedure, if we have a process with a bad performance, that may mean that we need to change something in the document. Not because we want, but because the performance, the actual performance is telling us there is here a problem, okay?
Yeah, yeah. And basically, the higher the risks, typically the more often you will want to review the process or the document that regulates it. So it could be also but I agree, in most cases, 12 months will probably be a good period of reviewing documents. Now, typically when you introduce a new document in a company, typically you would get resistance from at least part of the employees. And how do you normally deal with it?
We start during the writing of the document, okay? So when we start writing the document, the idea is, so if we are just describing what people are doing, and what people are doing, it's okay, according to the standard, the requirement of the standard, there's no problem. We are just taking pictures, okay? But if we need to make some changes, okay, and relating with information security would be something like we are checking how do an organization starts working with suppliers, okay, and okay, well, suppliers work with sensitive information, and you don't have any 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 commitment from their side regarding the confidentiality, and so we need to do something, okay? And in those kind of situations, so we want to introduce something new because it's a requirement in the standard and the company is not using, or it's because it's a good practice that the company is not following. My approach is going back to those people, okay, that we interviewed, and saying, okay, we have this problem, okay, the standard says this. The standard says we need to have we need this, but the standard doesn't say how to do it. How can we do it? So I start there. I start asking their inputs, because if they have good inputs, and if we follow their inputs, most of the resistance will be gone. Okay, most of the resistance will be gone. But okay, so now we included their suggestions in the document. Now we have changes. So next is explaining. So is the introduction of the document, explaining why we are doing this. It's not because the consultant or the head of the department wants this. It's because of this situation, this problem. I like to show examples. Okay, I like to show examples of other what happened with other companies. Okay, to show that this is not something, okay, theory. No, it's happened. They had this kind of problem. So there's a reason for doing this. Okay, so we can show them the pain, the actual pain for the organization. or what can be the benefits for them if we make this kind of change. So and then training. So if there
Mm-hmm.
are any changes, okay, then training, and then okay, we launch the procedure, and then the idea is to have 1 month, 4 weeks after, having a very small audit just to check if, because when we are seated in a in a desk or at a table, everything is easy. But now when there's a contact with reality, okay, do we need is does the procedure it really works, or we need to make some changes, because okay, the shock with the reality is
Mm-hmm.
the final test. So that's how I try to do that. um,
No,
um,
I like this approach a lot. Basically, there are four elements to it. As you were saying, first getting the insight and inputs from them. Second, actually raising awareness. Third, training, and then after the launch of the procedure of the document, you actually give this kind of improvement phase and making sure that all the, let's say, things that were not working well are working, that are improved. So yeah, I like this
yeah.
approach a lot, and I think yes, this will resolve a large majority of resistance from anyone. And what do you think are the most common mistakes that companies or consultants actually make when writing documentation?
um, so this is my opinion, okay?
Hmm.
So so I think the it's um, many many documents, okay, a lot of documents, writing a lot of documents, um, writing very detailed documents, and taking a lot of time to develop those documents, okay. um, and I don't want to be nasty, but okay. But it's sometimes sometimes I think that sometimes we consultants want to develop a lot of documents, because if we show a lot of documents to the company say, oh, okay, my money is there, okay, no problem. So okay, but the point is, um, the point is, as I said, I'm repeating myself, but we need to develop those documents, not because they are mandatory, no, but because we need some kind of we need some stable version of how we do things in the company, and I don't want to take a lot of time in doing that, because I want to have time and fresh minds for doing the improvement. Because if we want to do the PDCA cycle, so if we don't close the PDCA cycle because we took a lot of time in doing the doing documents, the time for implementing the management system is gone, and now okay, they have the certification audit, they pass, okay, and that's it. And but how many iteration cycles in the PDCA cycle did we did together? 0.8, 1, 0.7. So that's the improvement will not work there. So and yeah, the less time we use there, the sharper the mind will be
Hmm.
for the those iterations.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
those iterations.
I agree with you fully. I mean, companies very often think that the more documents they write, they will be more compliant, whereas actually the opposite is true, right? Because
Yeah,
this overhead is only stopping them and killing them, really, their operation. So,
yeah,
and as you were saying, it's
yeah,
killing their learning process. So, no, yeah, I agree with you fully.
yeah.
This is probably the biggest
And now
mistake.
I will put my hat of auditor, and as auditor, I read a procedure very weird, okay, with very demanding requirements, internal requirements, and I say to them, okay, but you are not following this. But I'm just the auditor. you are the specialist and you say that in your organization, this must be done, but you are not doing it. So it's a non-conformity. It's not in the standard, but it's in your procedure.
Yeah.
So beware of what you are writing.
Yeah. Exactly. Okay, so we had a very lengthy discussion today, and actually we spoke only about writing documents. So we didn't speak at all about controlling documents, and this might actually be a topic for for another episode. But let's wrap up this episode today. So, what would be your, let's say, top suggestions on how companies or consultants should actually write the documents?
So start with a template, okay, a structure that you can use, okay, template. I use, so for some topics, as I mentioned, like internal audits, corrective action, some topics you can use from company to company or as a starter. Okay, you then they can customize. Okay, but yeah, use work with people that are doing the job. So interview them in order to take notes, translate that into short phrases, starting with a verb. That would be a good starter for developing the documents based on what is currently being done. My experience is I don't like to mix. Okay, one thing is taking picture what is being done. Another thing is improving. I don't like to mix the two because it will take much more time. Um, be careful with the implementation. So prepare the implementation. There's a German consultant, not in quality, but that says that there's no resistance to change. What happens is that people are not well informed, are not prepared for the change, and they respond normally because of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we see as resistance is a lack of preparation for the change. Okay, not informing, not including, not training, not yeah, and yeah, I think yeah, it's like this.
Okay, great. Thank you for these insights, Carlos, and it's been a pleasure discussing this topic to you.
Yeah, pleasure. Yes, it was a pleasure also for my side. Yeah.
Thanks again, Carlos, and
Thank you very
thank you
much for the
everyone for
invitation. Okay.
great. And thank you everyone for listening or watching this podcast, and see you again in 2 weeks' time in a new episode of Secure and Simple podcast. Thanks for making it this far in today's episode of Secure and Simple podcast. Here's some useful info for consultants and other professionals who do cybersecurity governance and compliance for a living. On Advisora website, you can check out various tools that can help your business. For example, Conformia software enables you to streamline and scale ISO 27001 implementation and maintenance for your clients. White label documentation toolkits for NIS2, DORA, ISO 27001 and other ISO standards enable you to create all the required documents for your clients. Accredited lead auditor and lead implementer courses for various standards and frameworks enable you to show your expertise to potential clients. And a learning management system called Company Training Academy with numerous videos for NIS2, DORA, ISO 27001 and other frameworks enable you to organize training and awareness programs for your clients' workforce. Check out the links in the description below for more information. If you like this podcast, please give it a thumbs up. It helps us with better ranking, and I would also appreciate if you share it with your colleagues. That's it for today. Stay safe.